นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะปรมาจโลกธิปติสหังปติกตัญจาลิอาติวารังอายาชาตาสันติทาสัตตะปราจักขจาติกาเดเสตุธัมมังอนุกังปิมังปาจัง
นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะบุตตังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ It's very good to be here. I'm very impressed with the beautiful and graceful way you have received the Bhikkhu Sangha here. I've been taking care of my mother for most of the past decade, that past 10 years, so I haven't had a chance to be involved in this kind of an activity. So just to see so many bhikkhus, this is rather wonderful for me, and to see a large group of lay people who are very sincere in their love of the Dhamma, and then of course to come together in memory of Ajahn Chah, a person who influenced my life very profoundly. This is marvelous. This is my first visit to Malaysia, and I can't think of a better way to start, to be welcomed so kindly, so generously, and then to bring up the heart of gratitude for our teacher, and gratitude for this wonderful tradition. So thank you, sincerely thank you for letting me be here. I suppose some personal reflections on Ajahn Chah might be fun, interesting. They're always interesting to hear how we Westerners ended up with Luang Por Chah. I ordained as a samanera at Wat Mahatat in Bangkok in 1973. And I came to Thailand to become a bhikkhu, but I didn't know anyone, I didn't know any teachers, I just had the inspiration to take the robe. I had met Buddhism in India. I had been living in India about a year and a half actually, and so the first teacher I had, he suggested I go to Thailand. And in Thailand, I landed, and I'd heard that there was a Western monk in Chiang Mai. So one of my first words I learned in Thai was Prafarang. That's Western monk in Thai, and I needed to find a Western monk. So I made my way to Chiang Mai, didn't know where that was, and I spent 3 days walking around Prafarang, and finally I met a German monk who then took me down to Bangkok. And then in Bangkok I was ordained as a samanera, and fortunately my acharya in Bangkok, Prat Warasak, he was from Rayat, which is near Ajahn Chah's hometown in Ubon. and he was going to visit his family. He hadn't seen his family in about 7 years because he was a monk from the Buddha temple in London. He spoke English. So he invited me up to Royat to visit his village. And on the way back, he stopped in to pay respects to Lompo Cha at Wat Longpa Pong. I had heard rumors about this place and this teacher, but not much. When I went into the monastery, I was really struck by its serenity and its sense of composure and orderliness. That's what struck me the strongest. Just the sense of, especially in contrast to living in a city monastery in Bangkok. It was a great contrast. So we made our way to Lompo's Kuti, and he was sitting there. I think, if I remember correctly, there was just one other monk. It was very quiet, very empty. We paid our respects. And then in the discussion, I eventually felt I'd really like to be here with this man at this time, with this teacher in this place. And so I asked him, I said, could I come up here? Could I come up here and practice with you? And what he said to me was misinterpreted. He said to me, well, what I heard from the interpreter was, there isn't much food. And what he had actually said is, the food isn't very good, which was true, if you've ever been there. But I answered, thank you, I answered, I won't eat much. I will eat just a little bit. And so he said, fine, you can come. And I went back to Bangkok and organized my things, and then headed up to Ubon. Now in Bangkok, I didn't have any training. I was just put into a robe, and then I was just supposed to meditate and somehow figure it out. And because I didn't have a cultural background of monasticism, Buddhist monasticism, I had no idea what to do. So I arrived at Wat Pho Pong, and I think I arrived in a taxi, paid the taxi driver, which is pretty shocking for a monk to do. I was a samanera, but still. And a monk, Venerable Anando, who has since passed away, was a very good friend of mine, saw me get out of the taxi and paid the taxi driver and started laughing. So my training began. And I was reflecting on what are the things that I really am grateful for to Lompo Cha. So many things, really. But one of the things that I learned was a way of relating to people as a group, as a community, rather than just as an individual. And that might not sound like much, but my upbringing was very much an individuality. So to actually be in a situation where my preferences and my opinions and views were not primary, there was something bigger than me, a system of practice, a way of socially relating to a hierarchy, to elder monks, to seniors, and so on, was difficult, but invaluable, just invaluable. One of the things, like I've been involved a lot in establishing monasteries outside of Thailand, and one of the things that we've been able to do is to bring in a culture of monasticism into cultures which don't have monasticism. And this is not easy. Like Canada or California or England, there are some memories of monasticism, but there is no real culture of it. And the fact that Ajahn Chah, in his way, in teaching us Dhamma Vinaya, taught us a way of organizing our lives and living our lives in a social way, which was quite clear, very, very clear, very, very helpful. We were able to take that to England and other places. With the way, like who Ajahn Chah was, I have no idea. I couldn't fathom the depth of his being. So I was contemplating what Ajahn Chah, what did he draw out of me? What did he pull out of me? And that's the way I've been contemplating him as my teacher. And he brought out of me the very best. human qualities, because I had a lot of pretty unpleasant qualities as well, a lot of bad habits and ways of being a human being which weren't very, very pretty. But he had the capacity to draw out, like for one thing, I had tremendous affection for him, like you would have for a parent you really love, just tremendous love for him as a human being. And he drew out those qualities of the Brahma Viharas in my heart so that, thank you, so that I was able to trust him, tremendous trust. He had a strong sense of self-assurance, and his judgments were always very superior. His judgments on social issues, on problems with people in the monastery, the way he organized the monastery, his sense of judgment was very, very impressive. And so he was able, for me at least, to create a discipline in a monastery which wasn't a police state. It wasn't, you behave or Ajahn Chah is going to get you. Rather, it came from a state of love and deep affection and trust. And so he could create a monastic environment which was quite rigorous, quite demanding in many ways, but it never felt oppressive, because it wasn't oppressive. It was something that came from a very compassionate man with a tremendous sense of wisdom and a tremendous sense of his own culture. I've reflected on this being away from Thailand. Of the many things that impressed me, he really knew who he was. So it seemed to me, he really knew who he was in the culture. He knew his position, he knew his power, and that combination with his own understanding of Dhamma allowed him to create an environment which was very clear. It was very easy to surrender to that particular form and lifestyle. It might seem like a monk has no freedom. We live by some very clearly defined protocols and rules and disciplines and moral principles, and it seems like our life is very prescribed, very tight. And in some ways it is. But what I discovered in Thailand was that although I didn't have the choice to eat what I want or when I want or go where I wanted to and so on, I had the freedom to watch my mind. I had the freedom to look at suffering because the social construct was given to me. The social structure, my social definition was given to me. And that was a gift I think I intuitively maybe understood, but I understood it much more when I started to live abroad, because creating a monastic form abroad was not so clear, not so easy. So going into Wat Pho Phong, the relationship to the teacher, to the senior monks, the relationship to the laity, the way the place ran in terms of work duties and teaching duties and so on and so forth was very, very clear. There was no doubt about it. So that kind of social structure allowed me to look at suffering. And I certainly suffered. I certainly suffered restlessness, and I would feel homesick or just fed up, and my meditation would work, but usually it didn't work, and on and on and on. And Ajahn Chah would I'd go to him and he'd say, "Are you happy?" And being a complicated Westerner, I'd kind of, I don't know what's going on. I'd be full of doubts. And then he'd look at me and he'd just say, "Oton," just endure. Now, from another person, when you're suffering and all he says to you is endure, you think, well, thanks a lot. You can give me something, can't you? But because it came from Ajahn Chah, and he had that profound compassion and wisdom, when he said oton, it was really relevant. When he said endure, you really listened. He said, yeah, what else can I do? I haven't trained the mind. I haven't meditated. I lived heedlessly, not a bad life, just the kind of long-haired hippie wandering around the planet. So what else? I have to endure. I have to train the mind, and I have to bear with things. But it was sort of indicative of the power of him as a teacher, that he could say something so very simple and so very obvious, but it would be a profound teaching because it came from a profound place. It came from a man with great compassion and great wisdom. When I last saw Ajahn Chah before he had the stroke and lost the capacity to control his speech and his body, I saw him in 1979, and we were renovating Chithurst Monastery, and Lompa had been there a couple of weeks, I think, maybe longer. Ajahn Suchita, you were there. And it was time for, he had an early flight, so he was having early lunch or early dana in one of the rooms in Chithurst. And when he came to North America and England that year, 79, he was given very heavy cotton robes by the lay people at Wapapong, because they thought it's very cold, but they didn't realize that we have heating. So anyway, he had these very heavy robes, and then when he was about to take the plane, he was putting on lighter robes. So he was having the meal, and then afterwards he was changing his robes. And we were all sitting there feeling very tearful, because no one wanted him to leave, and we all wanted to go back to Thailand with him. And it was a very, very kind of poignant and moving moment. And he, being a very sensitive man and compassionate, he shared his rice with us. He got little bowls and gave us some of his rice. And then he started to give us robes. So unfortunately, I was too big. But the little monks, the shorter monks, got a sabong and a shirt and an angsa. And it was so appropriate and so touching and so very, very moving, because he could sense that, it was quite a challenge for us to start a monastery in England, and he could sense how much we loved him, and he was able to in a very, very simple way, touch that place in our hearts in this beautiful way. And that was the last time I saw Ajahn Chah before he became paralyzed. And then a few years later, I went to Thailand and saw Lompa Chah when he was paralyzed and he didn't have motor functions. And it was so sad. I mean, it was just heartbreaking to see him sitting there. And I remember walking out feeling quite sort of depressed and dejected. And I went over to where Lompa Liam was in that little sala out back at Wapapong. And Lompa Liam looked at me, and he could see I was looking very sad. And he said, "What's up? Well, what's going on?" And I said, "Oh, it's so sad to see Lompa that way." And Lompa Liam said, "That's not Lompa Chah. That body's not him." And I said, "Oh, of course." And that was such a profound teaching, because I had taken the body as being Lompa Chah, but his consciousness was somewhere, it wasn't locked by that. It wasn't inflicted by that. As a junior monk living with Lompa Chah, I found it was kind of really uplifting to be around him. So he'd often send me away. Because you could get, to a teacher like that, you can get very attached, very, very attached. But he'd often, at the end of the Vassa, before the Vassa started, before the rain started, we'd all meet at his kuti on his birthday. And then the different senior monks would say if they needed a monk or how many monks. And Lompa Chah would say to Lompa Ajahn, "Do you want a Farang? Do you want a Westerner?" And Lompa Ajahn, "Okay." And then Lompa Chah would say, "Okay, Viradhammo, you go there." And we'd be off. And I'd always feel, "Oh, I don't want to go. I want to stay with Lompa Chah." So he was like a parent to me. But he was wise enough to know that I'm not going to develop practice dependent on him. And so one time I was staying at Wat Thamsangpet, which is a beautiful monastery. And I'd spent my first vassa there. And I came back after the vassa for the katina at Wat Nong Ba Pong. And then I asked Lompa Cha after the katina, can I come back and stay at Wat Nong Ba Pong? And he just looked at me. I looked at him, which I thought meant no. So I went to Wat Thamsangpet, and I came back about 4 months later. He asked me, where'd you go? I just... So he'd play around with you like that. But in always a very, very, very compassionate way. The challenge of living in that kind of environment as a Westerner is sort of trying to figure out who you are in this new culture. This is it's very, very challenging. One of the things which you find in Western Buddhist psychology is an idea that to let go of your ego, you have to have a strong ego. That never quite fit with me. And I thought about that in terms of our life at Wat Ba Pong. And what was created for us there was a strong social environment that I could learn, become a part of, which governed my social entity, and then within which I could look at my inner world. And that was the gift of the Vinaya. The training that we got and we continue to get in this forest tradition was very meticulous. A very meticulous kind of training about, as you all know, about washing your bowl, taking care of your robes, taking care of your kuti, taking care of the acharya, coming to meditations on time, and so on and so forth. And all of that was a way of defining who I was in a conventional sense. Because when we talk about the Dhamma, we talk about the conventional truth, who we are as social beings. So I'm a mother, I am a father, I'm a Canadian, I'm Malaysian, I'm young, I'm a son, a daughter, whatever it is. That's the convention that we live within. And those conventions, if they are well defined, is very, very helpful. Because if they're well defined, then I can give up to the convention and then within myself watch the inner world, learn about the inner world. So by defining the conventions of being a monastic, the conventions of relationship with other monks, with the laity, defining just the ways we took care of the monastery, that became a beautiful training in defining who I was. I am a bhikkhu, I am a forest bhikkhu, and this is what I do. Get up at 4 in the morning or 3:30, maybe, I forget. Now that was what I do, but my mind, of course, didn't want to wake up. So my mind, I don't want to meditate that early. But my definition, my social definition was, this is what a bhikkhu does. He doesn't sleep in. He wakes up and he goes to meditation. He doesn't eat after midday. He eats 1 meal a day. He doesn't use money. He relates to his elders in a particular way. This is my social definition. Now within that, there is no way that I always liked doing that. I mean, I don't think any bhikkhu likes being a bhikkhu all the time. And I don't think any husband likes being a husband all the time. I don't think any wife likes being a wife all the time. It's impossible. But if I have a structure that defines for me how I should behave, what's the proper way for a bhikkhu to behave, then I can watch liking and disliking within that. I have the freedom to watch disliking and liking. So sometimes Ajahn Chah would send me to a branch monastery where I really didn't like it. I might not be I could not like the senior monk as much as Ajahn Chah, but that wasn't the point of it. The point of it was to watch liking and disliking, and the attachment to liking and disliking. And in the same way, the conventional structures that the laity live by, it's the same way, isn't it? You're defined as a person, as an IT worker, or you're defined as a mother, or as a student, or as a retired person. These are the social definitions that we all need. You need that, don't you? You can't live without that. The social definitions we have of morality, the 5 precepts. And they create the structure, the Vinaya, from which we can contemplate the mind, from which we can observe the mind. One of the misunderstandings I think that I find in the West is, like, people will say, well, you're attached to being a monk, or you're attached to the precepts. And what people don't understand is the difference between commitment and attachment. Commitment is something I give up to because it's bigger than me, bigger than my selfishness, something within which I can observe my mind. Attachment is a form of self-view. So if I attach to being a bhikkhu, then when someone keeps the rules different than me, then I get upset, or I get very, very critical, or whatever. But if I use this training as a way of observing my heart, then there's an adaptability. And this is the thing that I've had to learn this past 10 years, because my mother broke her pelvis in 1987, just to share with you how to use structures. So my mother broke her pelvis she was 87, so this was about 10 years ago, and I was living in New Zealand. And when she broke her pelvis, I flew to Ottawa, and I started to care for her. And the choice was to put her in a home or to take care of her in her own home. And I never have had a chance to be with my mother for a long period of time, because I was a monk and I'd visit, but I never had a chance to take her to a restaurant or buy her presents for her birthday or things that normal sons do. And so this was an opportunity. She was already 87, and I knew she couldn't be alone anymore. Her mind was clear, but she had macular degeneration, she had bad arthritis, her balance was bad, and a whole litany of complaints and ailments that people get at that age. So I decided that I would just try if I could take care of her. Now, as a monk, I have rules which don't allow me to be alone with a woman. But it's my mother. It's compassion. But the rule says you can't be alone with a woman. Yeah, but it's my mother. It's compassion. So I had a choice. I said, well, am I going to put her into old people's home? And what I feared there was that she would get depressed. She would feel abandoned. And if I wasn't around, she would, in some sense. So I took this filial piety, this filial duty, as a higher principle than that particular rule. I explained it to other senior monks, and I tried to confess it to myself every fortnight. So I knew, now that's a boundary that a monk should not go beyond. But I went outside the boundary. And for me, this was the idea of reflection on a principle which is very important in Sangha life. I wasn't dismissing the principle, I was laying it down, I was conferring with senior monks. I had to sometimes cook for her. Sometimes I managed in the end to figure out how I didn't have to pay people. So there are a lot of kind of challenges that a forest monk doesn't get in living in a condo with his mother. And so I was with her almost 9 years in her condo, and it was one of the most important times of my life, to be able to be with her, care with her, understand who I was in relation to her and to my brother. And the heart connection we had was obviously very, very beautiful. Her mind was very clear to the end. And what I'm sort of pointing out there is that if I was attached to being a monk, right? If I was attached to being a monk, I said, well, I can't take care of her because I'm a monk. But to me, that didn't seem right. To me, there had to be a principle. If I was just flippant, I say, well, the rules don't matter. Well, let's change the rules. That would be wrong too. The rules have to be the rules. These are our commitments. These are rules. And so The way I tried to do it is like when I stepped over the line, I tried to recognize, no, that's the boundary, but why? Why am I stepping over the line? Because my mother needs help right now. And that's intention. You know, the understanding of intention within one's social boundaries, within one's social conventions, is the real key, and that's the law of karma. If the intentions are skillful, and the social relationships are explained, and so I would try to explain, and I talked with Ajahn Sumedho, I talked with Ajahn Pasano, and others, and they said, fine, go ahead and give it a go. And to be honest, this time with my mother was quite exhausting because I was the principal caregiver, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Really, I wouldn't have. She died in March at the age of 96. I was with her in her home right to the end. When she died, I had a kind of feeling what I wanted to do. So I had a few people helping me, but I was very much on my own. So the last 4 days were very intense, very difficult, very exhausting, but very close, and I wouldn't change it for anything, although it was challenging. Then when Mom died, I called my brother, I called some friends, we chanted the Kusala Dhamma, and then I asked the mortician, the funeral home, not to come for 36 hours, because I just wanted to be with death. I wanted to be with the death of my mother. I wanted to be and see, what is this about? Because it's such a powerful thing, obviously, your relationship to your mother is very powerful. And so I laid out her body, I washed the body, I set her up so rigor mortis wouldn't, open the mouth and so on. And I would just meditate. I just look at her and meditate, and my mind is so peaceful. And Anicca Sankara Upadava, that chant that we do, all conditions are impermanent, their nature is to arise and pass away, and they're passing as peace. Such a powerful reflection, such a powerful reflection. And then it would get too much, and then I'd go out into my own room, and I'd help to organize the funeral and do all the worldly things and busy worldliness, and then I'd go back, and I'd reflect. With birth there's death. This is the way it is. Life is this way, there's death. And then I would just sit with that incredible silence and so on. So that lasted about, I think she was in her home for about 36 hours. Then we had the funeral. I took her to the crematorium. And then I pushed her body into the crematorium, pressed the button, and the flames burned her body up. And then I took the ashes and I spread the ashes. So I wanted to share with you, that our connection to our elders and our teachers is so important. And the gratitude that we can feel to Ajahn Chah and our parents, it's so important to make that conscious. And if we have the chance, if life gives us the opportunity to care for them, what else would you do? Huh? I didn't have a chance to care for Ajahn Chah in those last 10 years. I think I was able to do that for a week or so. I didn't have that kind of opportunity. And the caring that Ajahn Chah got in his last 10 years, I think, was beautiful to see. I remember going into his kuti, which had been set up as a kind of hospital situation, and it was so reverential and so lovingly devoted to his care. Like the monks would, before they touched him, they'd always pay Anjali and speak to him. Because when a person is paralyzed, you don't see the usual life form, and one could become rather careless. But here, the way the monks looked out for him, cared for him, massaged him, kept it clean was very inspiring to see. And I then, just to close, I remember Ajahn Pasano, he would take the monks from Wat Nanachat every Uposatha, I guess. Every Uposatha. Every fortnight they would go to, from Wat Nanachat, which is near Ajahn Chah's monastery, to Wat Bapong, and they would chant the Vipassana Bhumi, a chant that apparently Luang Por Chah really found inspiring. And they would go every fortnight for the last 7 years or some period of time. Every fortnight they would go and they would chant, and Luang Por Chah would be wheeled out in the wheelchair, and he'd sit there and receive their blessings and their love and the chanting. And that was moving too. That was very, very moving. And so this kind of a weekend where we can come together and remember gratitude is an exceptionally beautiful thing to do, because we all feel grateful. We're not ungrateful, but sometimes we don't create the social occasions, the situations where we can consciously bring to mind the love of our teachers, the love of our parents, the gratitude to them. It's a very, very skillful, very, very wholesome kind of thing to do. And when our hearts abide in gratitude, when we allow our hearts to feel gratitude, then the mind is free from desire. If you think of the third noble truth, the cessation of desire, the heart's free from desire, isn't it? To be grateful. And then our minds are much more reflective. They're not demanding anything. There's no agenda that we have. And the capacity to fathom the Dhamma in profound ways is much enhanced, much enhanced. So it's a very beautiful state of mind, but it's also a foundation for enlightenment. So by the clock, I see that I should close now. So thank you very much for your attention, and again, thank you for letting me be with you today.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.